Yes? I think for next 1 hour, we'll be discussing something about anthropology. Okay? First of all, I would welcome all of you to anthropology orientation session. And when you look at this particular subject, before I discuss about this particular subject, I would have to tell you what are we going to do in the next 1 hour or 1 hour 15 minutes or so. First, I would start off with what is the basic aspect of anthropology that we are going to study. Because we know that we have to choose one optional and we have 500 marks weightage with respect to optional, roughly 2 papers, 250 each. So in that context, we are going to see what actually anthropology studies, what actually anthropology constitutes. And in case when we study something about anthropology, are we going to have some real-time relevance in its application? So the first dimension that I would talk about is what is anthropology in its real sense. Then the second dimension that we would discuss is what is the syllabus of anthropology that we are going to study. That we know that what constitutes paper 1, what constitutes paper 2, that we would be seeing. And one beauty of this particular subject is that some aspects of paper 1 are related to some aspects of paper 2. And some aspects of paper 1 are definitely to be applied when you are writing an answer in paper 2. So that means we see to a larger extent there is a sort of interlinkage that is existing between paper 1 and paper 2. And when I am fundamentally giving you the analysis about the syllabus, I would tell you what all forms of interlinkage are going to exist when it comes to paper 1 and paper 2. The third dimension that we would see is why should you choose anthropology as an optional, right? Because you know that at least with the history of ranks that has been present or with the kind of results that you always see, you would definitely see some of the toppers choosing anthropology as their optional. And in that context, we will see why at all or what is the rationality behind we choosing anthropology or why should we choose anthropology. Because at the end of the day, we know that whatever we are learning, whatever we are doing, whatever we are practicing, whatever we are revising, whatever we are applying for this examination, it is all to maximize marks and it all to finally appear in the final list, right? So in that context, how well or to what push would anthropology as a subject would give you when you are going to get into the final list, or if you have to get into the final list, what would be the role of anthropology? So with that basic overview of the session that we are going to do for the next 1 hour, we would get into the understanding of what is anthropology. Now when you look at what is anthropology, the basic study, it is derived from the word anthropos. And when you see the word anthropos, anthropos simply mean human or man. And logy or pology, we see that logos means simply study. Logos means simply study of human being. And in what all dimensions are we going to see human being? What is the dimension of anthropology that we are going to perceive to a larger extent? We are going to look at the social, the biological, and the cultural understanding of a human being to a larger extent. That means most of you would be having a perception that anthropology only deals with some biology, or anthropology only deals with some tribes, or anthropology will only deal with some genetics, or anthropology will only deal with some archaeology, or anthropology will only deal with some culture. No. In fact, when you look at anthropology as a field of study, you observe, we see, or we study human being in its totality across space and time. And not only understanding the biological, social and cultural aspects of human being, we also study the variation of the social, biological and cultural aspects across the globe, across the space, across the time. And with that basic understanding of anthropology, if you look at anthropology, anthropology is divided into 4 different branches. We see that the first branch of anthropology that talks about is socio-cultural anthropology. The second branch it talks about is physical anthropology. The third it talks about is archaeology. And the fourth dimension or the fourth wing is linguistic anthropology. That means I see the 4 broad divisions of anthropology as such. And each of this division is going to focus upon one dimension of the study regarding human being. Because when you observe a society, when we see ourselves or when we see the others or when we see what society is existing upon, we see that definitely human being is not existing with respect to one element, but he has composite of multiple elements. He is not depending upon one culture, but he has composite of those different cultural elements which are existing. It might be religion, it might be family, it might be marriage, it might be kinship, it might be political organizations, or it might be economic dimension, or it might be religion. We see that across all of these dimensions, across all of these aspects, the human being is going to exist. And you also see an element of variation that is existing, because it might so happen that the religion that we practice need not be practiced by the others. The religion we follow or the beliefs that we follow need not be believed by the others. Or the language that we speak need not be spoken by the others. Or the kind of physiology that you see with respect to me need not be the same as yours. That means in this context, what do I observe? I see that there is an element of variation that is existing. Now, if you look at your class, the person who is sitting next to you will have different dimensions of physiology, different dimensions of culture, different dimensions of language, different dimensions of racial aspects, different dimensions of dialect, different dimensions of religious beliefs. That means in a section of roughly 100, 120 people, I see so much of variation existing. And when I look at, or when I spread this dimension of variation to the whole globe, I see that there is a lot of variation which is existing, and anthropology helps me to study that variation. And these 4 branches of anthropology will enable me to study different dimensions of this. Now, for example, if you look at socio-cultural anthropology, I see that when you look at human being, one common word that comes to your head is human being is a social animal, you say. Human being is a social animal, you say. And when you look at our evolutionary studies, when we look at how human being has been evolved, definitely in the evolutionary study you would see one particular trait, that human beings were not as powerful as animals that were existing. Because if you look at hunting and foraging society, there was no individual who was going for hunting. It was a group of society, it was a band society, it was a group of individuals who were going for hunting. Now in that context, what does that show? That shows that animal was mightier than human being once upon a time. Now if you look at one book called as Sapiens, right, written by Harari, he talks about one particular dimension of human being. How did human being emerge as the ruler of the world? Now when he says that how did human being emerge as the ruler of the world, that means, was it that human beings have got physically strong? Or was it the human beings have got socially strong? Or was it that human beings have got culturally strong? Or was it that human beings have got intellectually strong? What made them rule this world? Because once upon a time we were seeing that the animals were dominating human beings. Animals were stronger than human beings. But on a later date, what we are seeing, human beings are ruling. Why? What can be the phenomena that I can say? Don't you think we are the ones who are creating national parks? We are the ones who are creating wildlife sanctuaries. We are the ones who are focusing on the conservation of animals. That means when you are conserving something, you are definitely ensuring that you are more powerful than that. We are domesticating animals. What does that show? Because when you look at the history of domestication, domestication did not start in the modern era where you see different breeds of dogs being domesticated. That is what is that you see. It has an evolutionary significance. We see that domestication as an activity was an activity during Mesolithic periods. Was an activity during Mesolithic periods because Paleolithic, they understood that hunting and foraging was the only economic activity that was existing at that point of time. On a later date, during when they started attaining food security, then they slowly started gaining the capacities to domesticate animals. And that slowly started during Mesolithic period. Now with that basic understanding, when you look at some socio-cultural dimension, in that particular book, he talks about one particular hypothesis that human beings have got strong because of the process of socialization. Now I am telling a word or I am telling a line called rulers of the world. But if you look at our infants, if you look at the just born babies, are they dependent or independent? They are completely dependent. They are completely dependent. They are completely dependent upon the mother. They are completely dependent upon a support system. And to what extent are they dependent? They are dependent on an individual up to around 8 years, 9 years or 10 years. But just look at the case of be it a puppy or be it a piglet or be it a kitten. Are they dependent on their mother? No. As soon as they are born, they have the ability to walk. Then sir, in this context, how can you say the human beings have become more powerful? How can you say that human beings were ruling the world, or how are they ruling the world? It is purely because of the process of socialization. And as an evolutionary dimension, if you observe one hypothesis, they say it is the hypothesis of gossips. And they say that all across our evolution, they have seen that gossip as an entity has been a very, very important medium in forming social bonds. Don't you think so? It is very, very same with you also. Yes. Now when you're sitting in a room in your hostels or in this class or wherever, just before the class starts, the one thing that you definitely do is gossip. And one thing that is definite is whom you're gossiping about is not present there. Yes or no? Definitely yes. Right? If that person whom you're gossiping about is present there, what will happen? Right? Definitely. So what is happening is gossip is a medium of social bonding. And this social bonding has promoted an element of socialization process. This has promoted an element of socialization process, and what slowly started happening, this socialization process started building strength among human beings. They started building strength among human beings. And not only this dimension, there is one more hypothesis. They say that individuals' culture have been emerged out of fictions. Individual culture has emerged out of fiction. Fiction means what? Something which is imaginary. Now if I look at something like religion as a phenomena with respect to my culture, don't you think it is an imaginary belief system? I imagine that there is something, some belief system which is powerful, there is some force which is existing in the nature, and that force is going to protect me somehow. Now that means if bunch of people are believing the same imaginary force, that becomes religion. That becomes a practice. And that is what we see. Now if the same bunch of people, if they are believing in some bunch of familial bonds, it becomes family. If same set of imagination or if same set of imaginary reality is seen, when it comes to some norms, when it comes to some rules, then it becomes politics. It becomes the political organization with respect to a particular society. So in socio-cultural anthropology, as part of paper 1, what all do we study? We study marriage, we study family, we study kinship, we study religion, we study economic organizations, we study political organizations. All of these dimensions we see who is the central entity. Central entity is the study of human being. Is a study of human being with respect to marriage, with respect to family, with respect to kinship, with respect to economic organization, with respect to political organization, and how are these systems varying across the globe is what I am going to study in socio-cultural anthropology. And what is going to be my basis here when I am studying this socio-cultural anthropology? I know that there are something called as ethnographic studies. There is something called as ethnology. There is something called as fossil remains. There is something called as archaeological remains. There is something called as studying of different societies. And we have number of anthropologists who have studied these systems. I'll give you simple example. Right? We have something called as Dunbar's number. We have something called as Dunbar's number. Dunbar was an anthropologist. What does he say? That in Dunbar's number he says the magic figure of Dunbar's number is 150. What does that 150 imply? He says that any human being who is existing can maximum remember 150 human relations. That's it. If you want, try. Right? आप लोग just sit down and try recollecting the relations that you have. Try recollecting the close relations, the closest relations, some important relations that you have. The maximum that you can recollect, people will keep telling, no, right? I'm very, very social. I'm an extrovert. People keep telling. So in that context, sit down and try. The maximum that you can recollect maybe 120 or 130. So that means what is happening? You see that all of these observations that were done by Dunbar was on the field study, was done on the extrapolations. That means a maximum social relation that a human being can remember is what? 150. That is a neurological limitation that is existing with respect to human being. So that is a classic case that we study. Now one more thing that you see, that you keep hearing about men are men. You keep hearing? Yes, men are men. In what context is this heard among the society? In what context? See, I am not being gender biased in this context, but Just understand the importance and beauty of this subject. People will keep telling men are men. Now what is the context of this sentence is, it fundamentally shows that men are not committed to a particular relation. Yes. Now in that context, what was this? We see that there is an evolutionary significance to this. There was already some sort of evolutionary culture which was existing for this. Now what kind of evolutionary systems were existing with respect to that men are not being committed? For example, we see that initially we had this foraging and hunting societies. Now when we had foraging and hunting societies, what do you commonly observe? We used to see that men used to go for hunting, female used to be engaged in the domestic activities. Number of physiological reasons were the major aspect which was considered in this, where men could go for hunting and females were restricted to the domestic activities. One of them was physical strength. One of them was physical strength. If you have to carry some animal bigger than you, the individual's capacity of men was much larger. Why? The vital capacity of man is comparatively bigger, the body size is bigger. When the vital capacity is larger, when the body size is bigger, the individual has more strength, more physical endurance, and the individual will be able to drag the big animal to the site of habitation. That was a pure consideration. And there were other multiple factors which were existing there. But here what happened? Now in this context, there was also one confidence that was seen, that if men go and if men are killed, and even if one man was remaining, the activity of procreation could go on. The activity of procreation could go on, because what happens in this context is, we see that in any society there is a system of inequality, there is a system of hierarchy that is existing. And when you observe in any system, in any society, when we find this hierarchy or inequality that is existing, the simplest hierarchy that we see is men versus women. The simplest form of inequality that we see is men versus women. Now in this context, when you talk about this men versus women as sort of inequality or a kind of hierarchy that is existing, what do you see? That whenever there are these inequalities which are existing, I see that there is something called as the selfish gene of an individual activates. That means, what is it showing? It is showing that our behavior is not only determined by the circumstances in which we are existing, but there are some programming systems which are going on within our body called genes. And each of our gene has a memory. From where are we having this memory? From the systems of foraging system, from the hunting and gathering, from the Paleolithic societies, we see there is some memory which is being carried by this gene. Now in this context of inequality, what happens? The selfish gene of the male candidate is what? To attain immortality. That was the genetic memory that was existing. To attain immortality. And how does male seem to be attaining immortality? He says, to produce more children. To produce more children. How many of you noticed the news in the afternoon today? There was one news regarding Elon Musk. Elon Musk was telling one of his employees to carry his babies. Yes, that means what is this activity this is done? Where the selfish gene in the Elon Musk got activated to attain immortality through what? To procreating, through producing more children. And in this process, what happens? What is the selfish gene here? You see that when a male candidate is producing more children, there is no cost which is borne by the male candidate, because there is no physiological harm. There is no physiological change. He is selfish to attain immortality through producing more children. He doesn't bear any cost. When he doesn't bear any cost with respect to reproductive activity, with respect to bearing a child, will they be committed? They are not committed. Men are men. And then what is happening? Are you understanding this? Are you understanding this? You will start making sense of everything that you hear, everything that you read, everything that you observe when you learn this particular subject. Because this is what is giving you a real-time understanding of human being in different context. In different context. Now for example, if I point my finger at you and talk to you, do you like it? Do you like it? You don't like it. Why? You will say, "Arey first chahi dinchu." Yes. Why? This had an evolutionary significance again. Once upon a time, our systems were believing in supernatural forces. Once upon a time, before the emergence of the religion, we were believing in magic. Now when we were believing in magic, and I as a magician, you might be thinking that I am a magician. And in that context, when I am a magician, if I want to cast a spell, what do? You. Now when I do that, in those societies, this was a threatening call that was existing. And the evolutionary memory is telling, if somebody is pointing a finger at you, that means it is a form of threatening behavior that is existing. That is why you don't like it. Nobody told you this. You don't like it because it is an evolutionary memory which has been existing with respect to human being. Interesting. Beautiful. So in the socio-cultural anthropology, we discuss all of these dimensions. We study about religion, we study about magic, we study about kinship, we study about families, we study about economic systems. We study about political organizations, we study about marriage. You would have heard about marriages. Now, आजकल divorce rates बहुत बढ़ रहे हैं marriages में. सुना होगा आप लोग, right? And you see, there is some phenomena called as live-in relationship. In fact, UPSC had asked twice a question on live-in relationship. And it even asked upon, now probability is what? Extramarital affairs. चल रहे society में, है कि नहीं? है, yes. Now in that context, what is happening? One of the anthropologists studies a concept called as fluid love. He does a study on fluid love. What is this fluid love? Love flows like a fluid. Right? పోయేదేముంది dude, తిరిగి మరీ ప్రేమిస్తారు అంతే. Fluid love. That means if I am able to have compatibility and if I am able to find this, I love one person. Now immediately if I am unable to find something which I require, then my love flows to the other. Fluid love. And this is a theory behind extramarital affairs. Are you understanding? Beautiful, no? Now what is happening when I look at families? These days we see something called as kitty parties. Kitty parties. Now when you understand the anthropological perspective, these kitty parties are now turning into establishing a new form of family called as extended family. Extended family. Once upon a time we see the systems of joint family. From joint family we see nuclearization of family happening. From there now the systems of extended family, family friends. Extended family means what? You need not be related by the blood, but you are related by the purpose. That is where we study. These are the different dimensions that we study in the part of socio-cultural anthropology. Now when you look at the next dimension, that is physical anthropology, now most of you will be having an apprehension to choose anthropology or not based on physical anthropology. Because most of you will be engineers, right? Most of you will be engineers, or most of you will be BSc MPCS, or most of you will be BSc MPC. Now 99% of those people who have chosen maths because they didn't want to learn biology. Ye to pakka. If not that, this. If not this, that. Those who have chosen biology was not out of interest of biology but not to learn mathematics. Now in this context, what happens is you are carrying that evolutionary significance in your head. That physical anthropology, I will have to study biology, or I will have to draw all of those diagrams, I will have to talk about some physiology, some medicine. No. On the other side, doctors think that, yes, I have done my medicine, I am MBBS from AIMS, for me anthropology will be a cakewalk. Is it so? Do we study medicine? Do we study physiology? No. Sir, then what do you study in physical anthropology as a subject? When you look at physical anthropology as a subject, we study about the evolutionary dimension of human being. We study about the evolutionary dimension of human being. What do you see in the context of evolutionary dimension? Once upon a time, one of the archaeologists who was on roaming, he was roaming around and suddenly he goes to Tanzania. In Tanzania, suddenly he sees 2 footprints. And on the basis of the 2 footprints, he decides that there was a couple which was roaming. And this couple which was roaming with these 2 footprints which were present and which were present on these volcanic eruptions, they see that they were walking bipedal. They were walking bipedal. Bipedal means walking on 2 legs. How were our ancestors walking? They were quadrupedals. They were quadrupedals. We are now what? Bipedals. Now they were walking and some sort of physiological change started happening, and that is where we see the origin of physical anthropology coming into the picture. That means in physical anthropology, what do we see? We study about the evolution of human beings. We study about the evolution of human beings and who were our ancestors, what were their physical characteristic features, what were their main features which were existing, and what were their features which helped us to be like this today. Now, for example, these days, you have been using your mobile phone. Yes, and most of your mobile phone operates with thumb. Dekha hoga. Now, have you ever got it out that how could you operate whole of your mobile phone using your thumb alone? Don't you think a person who was designing the mobile phone should have used the same aspects of your thumb for designing the mobile phone? Definitely yes. That means what is happening? This is what we study in anthropometry. That is what we study in physical anthropology. Anthropometry is what? Measurement of different dimensions. That means in physical anthropology, we don't study core medicine. We fundamentally study what? We fundamentally study evolutionary dimension. Is it only evolutionary dimension? Evolutionary dimension with a biocultural approach. What do you mean by biocultural approach? I'll just show you. Now I was telling you that initially we were quadrupedals. That means we were walking on 4 legs. But now we are walking on 2 legs. We are bipedal. Bipedal means walking on 2 legs. We are having erect posture. Erect posture, but these days don't you think there are some de-evolutionary studies which are emerging. Now how many of you sit straight when you are sitting? Well, half of you will be like this. Now that means don't you think from bipedal and erect posture in the de-evolutionary theories again we will start walking like this? Don't you think so? That might happen. Probability. Because from this position we have emerged to this position. Now again you are moving back to this position. De-evolution. De-evolution. Now what kind of changes happened with respect to this erect posture? The first and foremost thing that changed was brain. Manakundane anukundam. Right? Because it is not our assumption, it is our belief in our ancestors. That over a period of time, over a period of evolution, what has happened? The brain capacity started increasing. The brain capacity started increasing. And when the brain capacity started increasing, don't you think, when the brain capacity is increasing, the amount of energy that is consumed by the brain will increase? Definitely yes. It will increase. Why? Because now the individual started gaining strength. Do you remember initially I was talking about rulers of the world? How did they become the rulers of the world? Was it physical strength? Was it cultural strength? Was it social strength? Or was it intellectual strength? It was majorly driven by intelligence. It was majorly driven by intelligence. And when you find this evolutionary intelligence emerging, what do we find in this context? We see the brain capacities were expanding and more energies were consumed by brain. And when more and more energies were being consumed by brain, automatically what is happening, my dear? I would have to consume something. I would have to consume something. So in that context, what started happening is I started looking for food around. I started looking for food around. And not only that, to make this process of consumption easy, the same brain, the same cognitive ability of an individual had discovered fire. Had discovered fire. I will not say we have invented. I will say we have discovered. It was existing and we have discovered. And what is the biggest advantage that fire has given you? Fire has given you to consume cooked food. That means easy to chew, easy to digest. Now when it is easy to chew, don't you think our dentition started becoming tender? Now when you look at the dentition of a chimpanzee, right, is it the same as you? Definitely not. Right? If you bite a chimpanzee, something will happen to it? No, but when chimpanzee bites you, it can tear you apart. The same thing can happen. Why? That means we see that there is an evolutionary development that happened with respect to our dentition. And how when you observe the facial features of a monkey, how was it? Don't you think we see prognathic? We see a pointed mouth, prognathic. Why? The brain size was less. But for us, why are we having orthognathic? Because our brain size developed. Are you observing this? This is what you study in physical anthropology. I am studying physical anthropology in the context of my culture. What is my culture? Fire. For what purpose? Cooked food. What is the biological dimension of it? Expanded brain. And not only expanded brain, I also see the intestines of the individual start becoming lesser size. Because why the size of the intestine started reducing with respect to human being? Because cooked food. Easy digestion. But initially what kind of food? Raw food. Raw food. So that means what is happening? I am studying my physical anthropology in the context of what? Physical anthropology with respect to the corresponding changes which are occurring. The corresponding changes which are occurring. For example, if you look at individuals who are existing in the polar region, if you look at the individuals who are existing in the cold regions, now what is the nature of their physiology? What is the nature of their body? When you look at what is the nature of their body, you see that there are some changes which are present. But in spite of the extreme conditions which are existing with respect to the cold conditions there, the human beings are existing? Yes. How are they able to exist? Fire. If the fire was not there, don't you think the existence of these individuals would have had some biological changes which would have went out of proportion? Definitely yes. Now, one common example that I keep telling, when you look at the people who are staying in the uphills, that hilly region, hilly people, hilly individuals, you see that they have an expanded thorax. Their chest capacities, their thorax is expanded. Why is their thorax capacity expanded? Because when you are living at hills, when you are living at an altitude, the amount of oxygen that is available for you to breathe is extremely less. Now when the amount of oxygen that is available to breathe is less, what is happening? I will have to breathe more at once such that my biological capacities and the biological systems are maintained. And one more common change that you will see with respect to this is the hemoglobin level. When you test an hemoglobin of an individual, you will see that the hemoglobin will be around 22, 21. What is our normal hemoglobin? 14 to 16. Why is this change? Because we see hemoglobin is the one which transmits oxygen, which supplies oxygen, which will be able to bind oxygen. If I have more hemoglobin, I will bind more oxygen. So that means, are we studying core biology? Are we studying core medicine? Are we studying core physiology? No, my dear, we are studying in physical anthropology the evolutionary dimension. Whatever I just told you, that is what we will study in 9.7 paper 1, that is ecological anthropology. That is ecological anthropology. 9.8 is epidemiological anthropology in paper 1. What do we study in epidemiological anthropology? How have the diseases evolved? Once upon a time we were seeing that the diseases were physical injuries. From there the diseases have evolved to be infectious in nature. From there we have seen, now today what is the era? We are in the era of lifestyle diseases, heart attacks, cancers, all of this, cardiovascular, cardiopulmonary, all of this. That means what is happening? The nature of the diseases have been changing. What are the reasons for this? We will see in epidemiological anthropology. And we will study about nutritional anthropology. We will study about growth and development. All of these are what? We are not fundamentally looking at the biology, we are looking at the applicative aspect of this. We are looking at the applicative aspect of this with respect to evolution, with respect to biocultural aspect. This is what we study in the biological anthropology or the physical anthropology. In archaeology, what do we study? We study about different fossils. Right? We study about different archaeological remains. And what do we actually study? Now, don't you think, if you observe a grave somewhere, right? You see these days, we see in the burial grounds, we have these graves which are present. Now, don't you think, grave as an entity of society by itself shows respect to the individual? That you are protecting the remains of the individual even after the death of the individual. That means, look at the strength of the society. The society is so bonded, the familial bonds are so emotional in nature that even after an individual is dead, we are protecting the remains by building a grave. In archaeological anthropology, what are we going to study? We are going to study the societal systems which were existing once upon a time. And we will also be able to study the societal systems which were existing once upon a time by comparing the present day societies. That is what we study in ethno-archaeology as part of paper 2. For example, when we look at some cultures of Chenchus, some cultures of Nagas, we will be able to understand that the previous societies were also having these similar cultures which were existing. That is what is ethno-archaeology. And in archaeological systems, we will study about the social systems, we will study about the physiological changes. And this becomes the basis for building up whole of your anthropology to a larger extent. Because I see one of the biggest sources of information is fossils and archaeology. And the fourth dimension that I study is linguistic anthropology. Chapter 7 of paper 1 is language, culture. What do I study in linguistic anthropology? In linguistic anthropology, I observe that each individual has its own purpose of language. And once upon a time, what was the nature of the language? The nature of the language was mere sounds. We see number of theories of origin. Pow pow sound, bow bow sound. All this or what? When I organize all of these sounds in a particular manner, I have language. And what is happening to this language or linguistic dimension these days? Now these days people are using these posh words. Yes, you would have heard. Now for example, previously we used to say that individual is fired. Fired means what? He has been removed, he has been thrown away. But now, what do MNCs use? MNCs says that we are going for restructuring. We are going for restructuring. That means what is happening? Depending upon the nature of the word that I use, the context and the meaning by itself changes. Right? Now don't you think, for example, we say Uber driver. Now when you look at the phrases that are generally used, they say that urban transport expert. Urban transport expert in our language, layman language, is who? Cab driver. Delivery executive is who? Delivery boy. Now you would have seen your Zomato, Swiggy changed it as delivery executive, not delivery boy. It is no more delivery boy. It is delivery executive. That is what is linguistic anthropology. We study the changes that are existing with respect to language. How is language influencing culture? How is culture influencing language? How is language influencing society? How is society influencing language? Don't you think in India we have more gender biased words? Yes. Now whatever we are referring to, we refer it as he. Yes, why? Because we have patriarchal mindsets. Patriarchal mindsets. When I want to refer to a constitutional position, I will say he is appointed as. How can I say he or she is going to be appointed to that position? That means what is it showing? The language is showing what is the nature of the society, what is the nature of the culture that has been existing with respect to that particular region or that particular context. All this we study as part of paper 1. All this we study as part of paper 1. We study about socio-cultural. That is from chapter 2 till chapter 5. In chapter 6 we study about theories. Now what are these anthropological theories? Anthropological theories are fundamentally basis for understanding different concepts, because each of the anthropologists would have seen number of observations, number of field studies, number of objectives. All of those we study to understand this subject. Chapter 7 is language. Chapter 8 is research methodologies. I will tell you the beauty of learning this chapter. When you see this beauty of this chapter, research methodologies, you will learn different methods to be seen, different methods to interact with public. And this is going to get so handy when you become a civil servant. Why? In that 8th chapter, we talk about something called as participant observation. If I want to study a system, if I want to study a phenomena, I will have to be part of that system and I will have to be part of that phenomena. Don't you think so? That tomorrow if you want to spread some awareness among people, first you will have to understand what is the nature of the society that you are existing in. Malinowski did that. Malinowski was very, very famous for doing this participant observation. That means participant observation is a very, very strong tool in policy making. That is why some of the famous anthropologists were even part of your planning commission. L.P. Vidyarthi was there. Verrier Elvin was there. Verrier Elvin was a very, very important member in the context of development of tribes. Right? Your S.C. Dubey was there. So that means what? Anthropology and the research methodology that you study, they have a direct correlation with respect to the nature of administration that you pursue. And when you look at the 9th chapter onwards, from 9th onwards, from 9.1 till 9.3, you study about basics of genetics. What is a gene? What is a chromosome? How do they react? How are they present? Now these days the government is talking about something called as sickle cell anemia. Yes, eradication of sickle cell anemia. And in that particular 9.1 to 9.3, we will be able to understand what is sickle cell anemia. We will see that it is a recessive disorder which is existing. And from there we will understand what to be done. 9.4 talks about chromosomes, chromosomal abnormalities. Are you understanding? Then from 9.5 we study about race. Once upon a time we used to see apartheid. Apartheid was there, black versus white. Now all of the debate, from where did we have the origin of race? Is race a biological concept or a race a social concept which has been crafted and created? We will study about those dimensions. In 9.6, we will study about genetic markers. Now, what do we see in genetic markers? Our blood group, our HLA. Now, for example, in forensics, if you want to do paternity diagnosis, right, either that individual is really your father or not, what do? You check the blood markers. If you want to examine a crime site, if you want to see the remains of that individual, whether it is belonging to that individual or not, we use these genetic markers. 9.7 environmental, ecological anthropology. 9.8 epidemiological anthropology. 10th chapter we study about growth and development and nutrition. You would have heard about ICDS. ICDS, right? ICDS, Integrated Child Development Scheme. Now in that, we use this nutritional anthropology to actually look into the growth of a child. At what age, what kind of nutrition to be provided such that the child is growing in a right manner. The comprehensive understanding of socialization process. In 11th chapter, we study about fertility, demographics, population, different population theories, right? And that 11th chapter, we use it in 2nd chapter of paper 2. That is where we study about demography of India. Then 12th chapter, we study about applications. I was just telling you, mobile phone, right? Mobile phone. Have you ever imagined or have you ever given a thought, why is that cricket bat only up to that size? You have seen. Handle is fixed, the bat is fixed. Why is it only up to that size? Kinanthropometry. Kinanthropometry. Have you ever thought about why football is that size? Have you ever thought about why football is of that size? No, kinanthropometry. Are you understanding? That means you would have heard about shin guard. Shin guard, right? How are they designed? They are designed on the basis of anthropometry. Anthropometry. Now, all of you, I'll tell you one simple example. Sachin Tendulkar, yes, David Warner, these people are some of the greatest batsmen. Yes, you would have seen this African player, South African player, Bauma. Yes, they are short. When they are short but they are able to play well. Why? They have a balanced stand when it comes to cricket. That is kinanthropometry. Depending upon the physiology, depending upon the somatotype, I will be able to maximize my performance in sports. And that is what is studied in kinanthropometry. Who will be a good wrestler? Who will be a good swimmer? Who will be a good runner? All of this you study depending upon the physiology. Are you understanding this? This is what all this we study in paper 1. What do we study in paper 2? In paper 2 of anthropology, we will study those dimensions which are something related to India. Everything will be contextualized to India. Everything will be contextualized to India and we will be studying those things which are related to Indian aspect. And when I look at this Indian aspect, what all dimensions do I study as part of this Indian aspect? I see that paper 2 can broadly be divided into 3 aspects. One aspect that you study is about caste. Right? You know that caste is an inherent characteristic feature of Indian society. Right? We keep hearing that caste in politics. Caste in politics. Rajni Kothari famously says casteization of politics and politicization of caste. We study about the Indian understanding and the Indian perspective about caste and various caste studies. Now you would have heard about SC and ST colonies. Now when you hear about SC and ST colonies, most of these colonies are on the outskirts of the region. Now when they are outskirts of the region, there is a caste consideration of habitation, caste consideration of settlement pattern in this. We study about this. Andhra Bete study of Sripuram. Andhra Bete study of Sripuram fundamentally talks about the settlement patterns vis-a-vis how are they varying with respect to caste system. So we will study about different dimensions and different manifestations of caste and the corresponding phenomena. You would have heard about caste conflicts. You would have heard about people demanding for reservation. Yes, now some of the people are demanding for OBC reservation. For example, Kapus were demanding. Yes, Patidars were demanding. Jats were demanding. Marathas were demanding. Why this demand? All of those we will be able to understand on the basis of understandings of caste with respect to India. The next dimension that we will see here is with respect to village. Village. Now when you look at village, we know that Indian societies are what, my dear? Rural societies or urban societies? We are rural societies. We are rural societies. More than 68% of Indian societies are rural societies. Hardly 30-31% of the Indian population is in urban centers. Adi peruke. Nijanga urban centers. Ashok Nagar. Does it look like urban center? Yes or no? Right? You don't accept because you stay there. Okay, you people stay in Himayat Nagar. Okay, let me give example of this. We don't know. That means when I observe the Indian society, I see most of the Indian society is rural society. And in rural society, I have number of characteristic features which are existing with respect to this rural society. And what are these characteristic features which are going to be determining what is the nature of a village? For example, I'll give you a simple example. In urban centers, you see nobody bothers where are you going, how are you going, when are you coming, when are you not coming, nobody bothers. But in a rural area, in your village, by mistake you get down the bus. By the time you reach home, the whole of the village will know that you have come. That means what? That is the networking capacity, that is the social solidarity that is existing in the Indian villages. Your Metcalfe talks about certain perspective of village. Gandhiji says, villages are the growth engines of future India. That means what are we observing? We are observing different perspectives of village. Some people will say village is a self-sufficient model. You don't need to be interdependent. Some people will say villages are little republics. That they are an entity by themselves and they can live because they have the marriage, they have the family, they have the kinship, they have the culture, they have the society, they have the setup, they have the political aspect, they are having the resource base, they are having the economic systems. Now when all of these are present, they say that village is a little republic. It is a republic in itself, it is self-sufficient. Somebody will say, no. Villages are interconnected and interdependent. They are not independent, but they are interconnected and independent. That means, dependent. That means what do we see? We see that we study different perspectives of Indian villages here. And when we look at the third dimension that we study about tribes. Very, very interesting section. Very, very interesting section for the reason that before we study about tribes, one major problem that we study or that comes to us when we are studying tribes is all of us are biased towards the colonial understanding of a tribe. Colonial understanding of a tribe. Why colonial understanding of a tribe? Now first suppose if I use the word tribe, what comes to your head first? A picture comes. A picture comes with something with an headgear, right? Semi-naked. Yes, this is who has constructed this. The colonial mindset has constructed this. The colonial mindset has constructed this understanding about tribe, the bias about tribe. Now in this context, what do we study as part of this tribal section? We study what is the colonial construct. We study tribe as a colonial construct. Because if I have to demystify, if I have to debunk these theories, I will have to understand what is the colonial construct. Then from there I will slowly start understanding what are the problems that are being faced by tribes. That is what we study in 6.2 of paper 2. And from there we study about what is the different cultural systems. What are the different systems which are existing. We study about something called as tribe, nation, state. That means we not only study about the tribal aspects which are existing in our society, we compare our tribal societies with the tribal societies which are existing around. We study about those dimensions. And we also study what are the different models that have been followed by India in development of tribes. Interesting. Now when it comes to this paper 2 will be taught to you by Nadeem Hasnain sir. Now I am a very, very small being to talk about this man because he has more than 30 plus years of field research in anthropology. And he is a social scientist and he has written 6 books on Indian anthropology, which is the most referred source for civil services examination. If you want, you can cross check that. Go back to your hostels. If somebody is actually preparing for anthropology, if somebody is having anthropology as an optional, they will definitely have at least one book which is belonging or which is written by Nadeem Hasnain sir. And you will be learning paper 2 from this person. Right? Not a small thing, my dear. Because he will not only give you the theoretical understanding of the subject, but he will also give you the practical understanding of the subject because by himself, he has done lot of field research. Lot of field research. So you would be learning Anthropology paper 2 from Nadeem Hasnain sir. I will be handling paper 1. I will be handling the paper 1 of Anthropology, right, with respect to my experience with the examination and my understanding about the subject all through the process of preparation, and able to arrive at a solution to maximize your score and maximize your efforts is what is my MSP or what is my USP that I can talk about. Are you understanding? Right? Now, why should you choose Anthropology as an optional? Now some of you will think, sir, just because you are teaching we should choose, or just because Nadeem Hasnain sir is teaching we should choose. No. Right? We will have to have a rational understanding why at all should we have to choose Anthropology. One definite thing which I can tell you with respect to why should you choose Anthropology as an optional is it has a finite syllabus. What do you mean by finite syllabus? That means I can draw boundaries to my syllabus. And it is 100% guaranteed that if you are able to cover 90% of the syllabus, you will be able to happily touch 300 plus in the examination. That means what? What is the advantage of this syllabus? The syllabus on the every topic and every line of the syllabus is objective. I don't need to interpret anything here. It is all objective, it is all straightforward. I can draw boundaries to my preparation. The biggest thing which is going to save your time in the context of preparing for Anthropology or preparing optional. Because I can't draw boundaries in most of the options which are present. Because some might be analytical, some might be abstract, some might be time taking, some might be interpretative. Now in that context, if I have to choose Anthropology, my first definite aspect will be the syllabus is finite. The second thing that you can see with respect to this is the sources availability. The availability of sources. Why availability of sources is definite, why availability of sources is more? Because you see that this happens to be one of the chosen optional by most of the toppers. This happens to be one of the chosen optional by most of the rankers. Just because they are choosing, you should not choose. I am not telling that. What is my fundamental point is, there are sources which are available. For suppose if I want to choose an optional like psychology. Now when I want to choose an optional like psychology, what is going to happen, my dear? I will have to fight out my sources. My sources are very, very limited in that context, and it becomes a difficulty when I am preparing for this aspect. So, but that problem will not exist in the context of Anthropology because it has an established sources which are present. And you will be taught by a person who has been one of the major sources, that is Nadeem Hasnain sir. Right? The third thing why you should choose Anthropology as an optional is with respect to its convergence. Convergence. Convergence with respect to what? My general studies. Convergence with respect to what? Convergence with respect to general studies. Now when I talk about this convergence with respect to general studies, what do I see with respect to this? I know in GS1, I have a paper called Society. All of the dimensions of society are learned as part of your paper 1 as well as paper 2. For example, this year in GS1 in 2023, there was one question that the nature of the marriages are changing in GS1 as part of society. Now this dimension we will study as part of marriages chapter in Anthropology. So that means what is happening? It gives me a better perspective of writing an answer in society. And society, what is the weightage of society in GS1? I see that question number 8, question number 9, question number 10, question number 18, question number 19, question number 20 of GS1 is from society. That means it is going to be what? Here 3 into 10, 30, 15 into 3, 45, totally how many marks? 75 marks. 75 marks out of 250 in society. It will have some convergence with GS2. In GS2, what dimension it has convergence? It has the convergence with respect to polity. In polity, especially when you talk about the democratic decentralization, 73rd, 74th Constitutional Amendment, your FRA, your legislations, your tribal welfare, all of this will be there. Then apart from that, in GS2, I also have definite convergence with respect to the topics of social justice. Because in paper 2, you study about religious minorities. In paper 2, you study about vulnerable sections. Now here also you are supposed to represent about vulnerable sections, and we are seeing there. And what is the average weightage that I see? Average I see roughly around 80 marks from GS2 will be converging. Now what is so converging in the context of GS3? When I look at what is so converging in the context of GS3, I see that some aspects of environment will be converging. Some aspects of the science and technology will be converging. Now when I see this, I would see a convergence of roughly 50 to 55 marks in GS3. Now sir, does it have any convergence with GS4? Definitely yes. What is GS4? Ethics. Now in GS4, when you look at the first chapter, you would see the role of family, role of parents in upbringing of a child. That means whole of the socialization process. Do you remember initially I started my lecture itself by the word socialization. I would be having a better perspective of these understandings of socialization when I read anthropology. So that means what is happening? The biggest advantage of this subject is it has a lot of convergence with general studies. It has a lot of convergence with general studies. If I am able to understand this subject in a right manner, I can use it in all of this. And some of the anthropologists would have done some basic social anthropological research which is existing. And I can definitely use their perspectives in my essay. I can definitely use their perspectives in my essay. Now when I am able to use their perspectives in my essay, when I am able to quote them in my essay, who are general with respect to, not only specific with respect to anthropology, but some aspects of society, I will be able to have an edge again. So that means anthropology as a subject has a lot of convergence with respect to general studies. The third reason. The fourth reason that why you should pick up anthropology as an optional is, I would say it has a post-exam benefit. There are very, very few optionals in civil services which has post-exam benefit. What do you mean by post-exam benefit? Now once you qualify this exam, after you qualify this examination, you are supposed to move out into the field. Now when you get into the field, half of your optionals will not be getting into your hand, half of your optionals will not be useful there. Now in that context, anthropology will definitely have an edge when it comes to post-exam benefit. Now when it comes to post-exam benefit, what do you see here? You see that when you talk about this post-exam benefit, it will enable you to go for people-centric administration. Why people-centric administration? Because I have learnt different methods of research, different methods of understanding anthropology. I was just giving an example of participant observation. I was just giving an example of participant observation. And in anthropology, what do you study in 8th chapter? You study that any decision that is taken as an anthropologist will fundamentally depend upon field study, but not random study. We have something called as PRA. We have something called as RRA. All of these are definitely going to help us in administration. The post-exam benefit. Definitely. And the fifth one that you see, very, very important, because this is exam, this is competition, it is scoring. But I would put an asterisk to this. Why asterisk to this? Because when you say it is scoring, you have to fundamentally understand that what are the different ways of getting score in it. Because if I randomly study anthropology, if I randomly write anthropology, will I be able to score more? No. You will not be able to score more. Why? Because there are people who get 180 in anthropology, there are people who get 320 in anthropology. Because you keep hearing that people telling anthropology is scoring, anthropology is scoring, anthropology will give you good rank, anthropology will give you good rank, all the toppers are choosing anthropology. Beautiful, fine. But in the same option also we have seen people getting 180. We have seen people getting 320. What is the difference? The difference is knowing what you are supposed to know in a right manner and representing the content in a right manner. And one of the smallest trick that can be followed and that I have been following and that is being followed is interlinking of paper 1 along with paper 2. And not only that interlinking of paper 1 along with paper 2, integration in an organic manner of static dimension as well as current affairs dimension. I was just telling you that with respect to that mobile phone wala example, that is what? Static or dynamic? Dynamic included with static called anthropometry. I was talking about some concept called as fluid love. What is that? The dimension of static called marriage imbibed with the field study, the dynamic aspects, because for anthropology, if you are able to see or if you are able to observe, there is whole lot of research ecosystem which is present in this country. When you have whole lot of this research ecosystem which is present in this country, that means there is a research which is going on and for which we will have to be updated. You will have to do that part or I will have to do that part. I will do that part on your behalf. Ever chesna okate kada. Because at the end of the day what? You are going to write the exam. And we are going to make you write the exam. That is what is the fundamental aspect that I am saying here. That it is scoring. It is scoring only in a particular manner if you represent the content that you have, because these days the papers are becoming very, very dynamic. For example, in paper 1, glottochronology, right? That is part of your historic linguistics. Hardly anybody knew about that. But you believe it or not, that was present in my notes which I prepared in 2016. That was there in my notes which I prepared in 2016. That means what? That is a pending question. In 2020, we had one question on writes the passage, liminality. That was there in my notes. That means what is happening? It is not just restricting to the mainstream sources, but you will have to exhaust the sources when it comes to anthropology as a subject. You will have to do it or I have done it. I have already done it. And I don't need to say anything regarding, because he himself is the author. Paper 2. It's a beautiful opportunity. And it is a very, very rare thing that an author of 6 books which are the most referred is teaching a subject whom he has been, which has been his profession for last 30 years. Which has been his profession for last 30 years. And you also have to understand that I will be able to handle the socio-cultural anthropology with equal balance as that of physical anthropology. Most of the times we see that there is a divergence. Somebody will say socio-cultural anthropology beautifully, but physical anthropology they will not be able to cover. Somebody will cover physical anthropology beautifully, but they will not be able to cover socio-cultural anthropology. But I will give you a right balance of both socio-cultural as well as physical anthropology, which is required for the examination for me to score well. For me to score well. Because 90% of the aspirants are able to comfortably score good in paper 2. But they struggle to score in paper 1. Why? Because they do not know what kind of substantiations to be given when you are writing physical anthropology. When you are writing socio-cultural anthropology. If I am able to have all of these case studies at my hand, it becomes scoring. It becomes scoring. And I think this is what is the general understanding about anthropology. And with respect to the various perspectives and various understandings, probably we will be starting our course by July 15th. Around July 15th, we are going to start our course. And tentatively, we will be finishing that within a span of 3.5 months. Right? Because finishing the syllabus in time is again a very, very important thing when it comes to anthropology. Why? Because if I don't finish it in time, I will not be able to practice them, I will not be able to imbibe them. Right? So we will be finishing around 3.5 months is what is the time period that we are going to keep for finishing this optional. And you know that we will be having answer writing practices as part of the sessions. And we will also be having one-to-one mentorship when it comes to anthropology as a subject. Because you demand or you need the hand-holding process to be done. You need the hand-holding process to be done in the context of anthropology, and all sorts of things will be given to you. Right? Because I have written the exam multiple times, I have given interview multiple times, I have seen the process multiple times, and all through my process, my beautiful, good old friend has been anthropology. And in this aspect, that I think with that sort of experience, with that sort of energy from my side, with that sort of experience from the side of Nadeem sir, who is going to teach you paper 2, we will definitely ensure that we sail you through this process of anthropology. Right? If you have some questions, the session is open for questions. I am more than happy to answer. Right? Any questions that you have, you can answer. You can ask, then probably I would answer. Any questions? Online, offline, anybody? Online, any questions? Regarding the admissions, you can contact the front desk, right? And also a form will be circulated, that will be there, right? So please tell us the weightage of the chapters. Now when you look at the weightage of the chapters, in the context, 2 minutes my dear. When you look at the weightage of the chapters, we see it keeps varying. But there are some chapters which are hotspots. For example, 1.5, 1.6 is definite. Where 1.5, 1.6 will fundamentally talk about primatology and archaeology. That is definite area. 1.8 is definite. Then apart from that, I also see a question from 5th chapter, that is religion. I will definitely see questions from 6th chapter, that is anthropological theories. I will definitely see questions from 9.4, that is chromosomal abnormalities. To a larger extent from 9.4a, that is structural and numerical abnormalities, that I will definitely see. 9.7 is a definite chapter, right? 10th and 11th chapter and 12th chapter are definite. These are some of the hot spots that are generally seen in paper 1. When I look at paper 2, I will definitely tell you that there is question on 1.3, that is ethnoarchaeology, paper 2. Or if you look at 2nd chapter, that is demography, that is definitely there. 3.1 with respect to Varna system, Purusharthas, I find a question. 3.4, 3.3 with respect to caste system, right? 5.1, 5.2 with respect to village systems, right? And I also see 5.3 with respect to religion, religious minorities, I find a question. 6.2 issues of tribes, which is definitely a question which is present, that is 6.2 of paper 2. Then I see 7th chapter ethnicity, definitely I will find one question. 9.1, 9.2 of paper 2, definitely I will see a question with respect to applications of anthropology with respect to the NGOs or the role of NGOs in development of anthropology, all of this. So these are some of the hotspots. As we progress across the course, you will be seeing. And one speciality of this course is after every chapter, we will be discussing all the PYQs which are present with respect to that particular chapter. Because that is extremely important when it comes to optional like anthropology, right? How will the paper pattern for anthropology, is it of more static or current affairs? I would say it is a combination. I would not say it is static, I would say it is dynamic in nature. For the reason that, for example, if you look at 2021 question paper, there was one question called deep ecology. There was one question called deep ecology. Actually, that is an extended theory of E.B. Taylor. That is an extended theory of E.B. Taylor. So that is what? Dynamic aspects. And for example, in 2020, there was one question on Jane Goodall. Now, 90% of the aspirants did not know. That was beautifully present in my notes, because Jane Goodall is one of those entities who is very, very famous primatologist. And whenever I am writing upon primatology, whenever I am writing about social behavior of a primate, I will definitely have to state Jane Goodall. So on that, they were asking a 10 marker and my notes had the 10 marker. Liminality, my notes had it. This year, glottochronology, my notes had it. That means anthropology will appear static with respect to sources, but it is dynamic with respect to expanding the horizon of understanding. That we will take care. That we will take care. Paper 1 I will take care, paper 2 sir will anyway take care. Right? I stand very small in front of sir, my dear, because his experience, right? What will be the timings of the class? Class timings will be updated. It will be updated accordingly, right? Tentatively around July 15th we are starting. Okay. Sir, for paper 1, which book should I refer? What are the sources, sir? See, generally I can't tell you one particular source, right? Because if you ask me, sir, what do you refer or what have you referred? I would have referred multiple sources, right? Multiple sources definitely, because what happens is anthropology, once upon a time, it was considered to be static with respect to sources. But on a later date, it became very, very dynamic. For example, this year's paper 1 had one question called The Perspectives of Globalization of Arjun Appadurai. Arjun Appadurai. The beauty of it is, I had the notes of it. None of the people had notes on it. Why? Because when you observe one peculiar trend in anthropology, every year one social scientist has been picked up and questioned. And in that context, Arjun Appadurai was in news and Arjun Appadurai was famous. That is the current affairs aspect. But people say that Arjun Appadurai is out of syllabus. No, Arjun Appadurai is a social scientist. He had perspectives on globalization. And when we study economic systems, economic anthropology, we have the impact of globalizations on indigenous systems. Hai usme. So please understand, I cannot restrict myself to one source. I will have to refer to multiple sources more than anything. I will have to refer to research journals to give you the case studies. Because anthropology has gone beyond writing subject. I will have to write subject, I will have to substantiate, I will have to value add, I will have to state a certain current research which has been going on that particular topic. That is what is going to fetch you marks, my dear. Getting 300 plus, it is not just like that. You have to have all of these dimensions. Right, sir, can we purchase this clothes? This is available online. This is available online. Sir, could you please compare the political science and anthropology, which is better? Right? Now, if a faculty who is teaching political science, if he sees this video, or if she sees this video, it's a problem to me. Right? You want to corner me. I would not say, I would not compare political science or anthropology, but I will definitely tell that anthropology is a scoring optional. Anthropology has been performing well with all the records for last few years. If you observe, for example, this year's third ranker, last year's third ranker, right, usse pehle first ranker, sab anthropology se tha. And anthropology is one such optional which gives you minimum guarantee. కొన్ని ఆప్షనల్స్లో ఎలా ఉంటుందంటే డిపాజిట్లు కూడా తక్కువ. Anthropology as an optional has minimum guarantee and it has a huge scope for it to give you bumper majority. I can tell you in my first attempt, the reason for me to get an interview call in my first attempt itself was anthropology. My general studies was average score in my first attempt, around 360 something. But my anthropology was 280 plus. That actually gave me an interview call at that point of time. Anthropology has always stayed with me. Right? Inta, venta, janta, nadustune undi nato. That is why I can definitely tell that anthropology will give you minimum guarantee. Minimum guarantee. If you take care of paper 1 and if you take care of paper 2 in right proportion, things will fall in place. Trust me. Right? You can have online, my dear. You have online classes. You can have online classes. Right? So those who are attending online, you will definitely have online if you want. Okay. Those are attending offline. If you want to experience my performance, you will have to attend offline. Right? That will be beautiful. Right? What is the name of the notes you tell? Huh? My notes. What is the name of the notes you tell? My notes. My handwritten notes. Right? It is not yet published. Right? So it is my notes, my dear. So definitely I am telling you, I have multiple sources which are being referred. Sir, is 3 months enough for this optional? Right? 3.5 months is roughly we take to finish the syllabus. Right? 3.5 months is the time period that we take to finish syllabus. So it should be sufficient. Any other making questions, Leva? Acha, you understood everything? Oh, okay. Right? Any other question that you wish to ask? I think somebody is giving me a suggestion. Please publish your notes. He is like, please close down your shop and publish the notes. Beautiful, my dear. Thank you. I would definitely think upon that. Right? Okay. Anything else? Anything else? Meeken levama? All fine? Yes? Okay. How to make anthro notes? Right? My simplest thing that I can tell you is attend my classes. Right? You have ready-made notes which will be ready with you. You will have ready-made answers for PYQs. And I have a compilation of 300 to 350 answers on PYQs. All of those will be there with you. Right? Why? Because anthropology is such optional where I can definitely score 180 to 200 if I have grip on PYQs. All that I will have to give jump is that additional 70-80 marks. That which will be taken care in the course. Definitely. Sir, actually I am good at physical anthropology but weak at socio. How can I manage? Maybe you can come down to the institute, my dear, or maybe you can take my contact number from the office and you can contact. Tell me one book. They have decided to go for a surgical strike on me. Tell me one book. वही तो बोल रहा हूँ यार, एक book तो नहीं है. Right? For physical, some parts of physical I referred, ignore material. Right? So you have different aspects which are present. You have MA, right? So different sources are present. Please tell me the fee details for online classes. My dear, please find out. I think I'm not very sure about the number, but just contact the front desk, they will tell you, they will update. Is that clear? Online, is that clear? If I say 3.5 months, it is both for paper 1 and paper 2, no? Anthropology is paper 1, paper 2, right? Yes. Anything else that you wish to ask? Anthro PYQ book source. So timing will be updated, my dear. Timing will be updated. Sir, will you give anthropology books? I will give the notes. Not as an handout, but through dictations, through explanations. Right? That will be there. Okay. What time will be the class? Mostly it will be in the morning only. Right? Mostly it will be in the morning only, my dear. Right? Where we can see the update. That you keep following the Telegram group, you can contact the front desk, it will be updated soon. Right? Yes? Online, is that fine? Any other? My classes are in both online and offline, hybrid. हमने बताया था, right? I'm giving you the details again. It is starting around July 15. It is both online and offline. Paper 1 will be handled by me. Paper 2 will be handled by Nadeem Hasnain sir, right? Who is a social scientist. Then one more thing is you will be having answer writing practice. All the PYQs will be covered. Then one-to-one mentorship will be provided as part of the course. Right? Any more details? How can we link static with current affairs? That I will teach you in the class, my dear. Right? You will have live as well, right? You will have live. Online until live hai kadamma. Right? That will be there. That will be there, right? That is done. Right? So any other issues, please kindly contact the front desk. I think I have addressed most of your questions. Right? That's it from my side. So thank you, my dear. That's it from my side.